William Evans here with Business Then. The Asian markets taking quite a pounding this Monday. European markets just opening up. They following suit?
Yeah, it's not great, I'm afraid, so far. Of note, the Spanish stock index has fallen below 6,000 points for the first time since 2003, although unemployment did fall slightly in May, less than 1%, but still going in the right direction now at 4.71 million people. That's still around 23% unemployment there in Spain. The Frankfurt Bourse as well, that has opened below 6,000 points for the first time since January. So not a great day. It's following on really from the Asian markets, as we mentioned, which were following on themselves from that bad data on Friday from the US. Unemployment heading upwards in the US, as you can see there. That was Asia's first chance to respond to that sort of data that is coming out there. One of the most notable stocks on the Japanese market, on the Tokyo market, was Sony, because they traded below 1,000 yen for the first time since 1980, if you can believe that. Wow. Now, of course, they peaked at nearly 17,000 yen, to give you an idea of the roller coaster
scale on it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. That was in 2000 with the tech bubble, the dot-com bubble. Why are they now at such a low point? Well, of course, there's recent factors such as the strong Japanese yen, which is affecting a lot of exporters in today's trading. Floods in Thailand and, of course, the Japanese earthquake last year haven't helped. But also, of course, it hasn't made a profit in 4 years, which you can imagine has quite an effect on a company's stock price.
So. Yeah.
But of course, it used to have those iconic products such as the Walkman, the Discman. In recent years, it's struggled really against Apple, Samsung on the hardware front, and it's never really quite got its software act together. You could say the PlayStation, maybe they're getting going on that front, and they're integrating videos and online experiences with that. But it's not quite the likes of Google, Facebook, Apple, the big names, largely from the US now. But as I mentioned, Samsung there from Korea, a lot of competitors aiming for Sony at the moment, and they're spread so thinly across so many different sectors that they're finding it difficult to specialise at the moment.
Okay, well, next we're going to go on to the case of Jérôme Kerviel, gripped France, of course, when he was convicted for abuse of trust in 2010. Now the rogue trader, who lost nearly 5 billion for Société Générale, is launching an appeal. But has anything actually changed in the banking industry to stop this sort of thing happening again?
Jérôme Kerviel was responsible for the biggest single trading losses in French history. 4 years on from the fraud that shocked France, lack of legal safeguards leave the banking system vulnerable to the actions of rogue traders.
There is already something in the regulation, for example in France, around the more generic operational risk, and all banks have to manage their risk properly. That's a given. But there isn't anything right exactly tackling the rogue trading issue as such, which is a form of operational risk.
Kerviel admitted covering his tracks, but said superiors at the bank colluded in his dealings. With Kerviel having cost Société Générale almost €5 billion, you might be forgiven for thinking potential losses would be sufficient incentive for caution, but many banks believe it can never happen to them.
But I guess, if you ask any firm or any bank, investment bank in the world, you will ask them, are you secure in terms of, how your dealers, traders operate, and they will tell you, oh yes, we are, until something like what happened at SocGen or UBS or JP Morgan actually happens.
Kerviel is now appealing his 2010 conviction for fraud, claiming it was secured under false pretenses. He says his practices were widespread at Société Générale. Lack of preventative legal measures suggests they will not disappear from banking for some time to come.
And next, a lot of people thought the country most likely to need a bailout next was Spain. But in fact, another country may go and surprise us by being first.
Yeah, Cyprus may get in there before anybody else, whoever that may be next for a bailout. But over the weekend, the head of the central bank there and also the country's president said, well, they certainly couldn't rule out getting EU aid. Now, of course, there's a deadline on this. That will be the end of this month, when the country's second largest bank, the Cyprus Popular Bank, needs to find €1.8 billion. That's to comply with new capital requirements and new rules that have been put in place so that banks can cushion themselves against financial shocks. Also, of course, Cyprus, historically, a lot of links with Greece, needless to say, and the situation in the Greek economy at the moment means that Cyprus is very highly exposed to that. So we could very well be seeing a bailout from the EU for Cyprus potentially as soon as the end of this month.
And we're still talking about Spain as well. Prime Minister Rajoy has been trying to restore confidence with some quite bold suggestions.
Yeah, he's really changed his tune, Mariano Rajoy, because, of course, he's only been in power for around 6 months. Just a few months back, he was fighting with Brussels over deficit limits, over exactly what Spain's deficit would be for the year. Of course, Brussels was saying he had to keep it down. He was saying, Spain needed more breathing space. He lost that battle, and now it looks like he's really turning into a Europhile, because he has been saying over the weekend that Europe should have a more centralised financial system, and that essentially Brussels should have more oversight of national budgets. Now, what he's probably trying to do here is get back the confidence of investors, get back on side with Germany, who of course are also pushing for this sort of integration of sorts. But it does really show how far things have come just in a short time, because, like I say, just a few months ago he was fighting against sort of this internationalisation, I suppose you could call it, for Spanish sovereignty. Now he's really pushing things towards Brussels.
Well, those figures out this morning, in fact, have confirmed that Spain's unemployment rate is the highest in Europe along with that. And over the weekend, 3 towns there where they held a vote on whether to use money, usually spent on bullfighting festivals, on job creation instead. The result turned out to be bad news for both the bulls and the unemployed.
For the people of Guijo de Galisteo, it's a choice between bread and circuses. The local municipality in Extremadura in central Spain asked citizens to vote on whether to spend half its annual budget on jobs or bull-run fiestas. Among the local pensioners, there was strong support for jobs.
Work for the young. I told the cameras the other day that instead of having 3 or 4 bulls the day of the patron saint, just have 1. Why do you need to have all that money for so many bulls? Use it for jobs, which is what we lack.
But the young, who struggle with Spain's huge youth unemployment rate, the highest in Western Europe, are more fatalistic. They want the bulls.
Because I like the fiestas. I like the fiestas and there is never any work anyway. So I'm voting for bulls, and that's it.
I voted for bulls because the fiestas attract many people and bring people to the bars. If we didn't have the bulls, hardly anyone would come here.
The jobs option would have created only temporary positions. One seasonal worker says the fiesta will kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
The fiestas also create jobs for people. For the bull run, you need people to build the plaza. If there are no bulls, those 8 to 10 people won't have work over those 2 or 3 days.
In the end, the bulls carried the day by a margin of 3 to 1. 25% of people in the area are without jobs. They decided it was worth keeping something to get excited about.
Yeah, what about the bulls? That's what we all know, really, isn't it? Last but not least, we're going to move to Russia. It seems energy giant BP might find it more difficult than it thought it would to get out.
Yeah, because of course 9 years ago they invested in Russia. They partnered with a group of Russian oligarchs known as AAR, 50-50 deal, creating TNK-BP. Since then it has been very profitable for BP. They've done very well out of it, but there have been tensions all along. In 2008, Bob Dudley, who's now the CEO of the whole of BP, he was forced out of the country due to visa issues, the Russians said. He called it a campaign of harassment, so I suppose it depends on how you look at it. But more recently, the Russian investors, AAR, went to court to block a big exploration deal that BP had signed with Rosneft, the Russian state-backed group. So now BP says it wants to sell its 50% stake in TNK-BP. Well, that might not be as easy as it sounds. AAR, the Russian investors, they say that there are competition clauses, that there are confidentiality clauses, which means they can't tell any potential investors exactly what's on the books. You can see why this might be a bit of a problem if you're doing due diligence, if you want to sell a company, if you want to buy the company, you kind of want to know that sort of thing.
You would have thought so.
So it looks like they may be holding essentially a veto here. Why do they want to do that? Maybe because if they want to buy out BP's stake, then this is rather a good way to keep at arm's length any other potential investors who might be interested. So that's one theory at least.
They've been locking horns for months, haven't they? It's my bull pun. See what I did there? You know what I mean. Well, thank you very much. Will Edwards with the business news here on France 24. Latest news headlines with Claire. She'll be here right after the weather on France 24. Stay with us.